Well, welcome everyone. We have the spot right before lunch, so we'll try and keep you guys engaged and, hopefully it'll be a good lunch coming up, if not. So my name is Stacy Katz. I'm an assistant professor at Lehman College in the library. I'm the open resources librarian and STEM liaison. This is my colleague Jennifer Van Allen, who is an assistant professor in literacy education. So by way of introduction, most everyone in this room is probably familiar with the OER initiative going on in CUNY, the $4 million that were given to CUNY over the past 2 years each for to develop open educational resources. Jennifer and I had actually known each other previously because the library and the School of Education have a research and writers group, but we got to know each other more when Jennifer applied for the OER initiative. Then as part of the OER initiative, we've had through the library several workshops, including one on Manifold, which some people went to that session today, on the CUNY Academic Commons, but we also had one on open pedagogy. So Jennifer was interested in open pedagogy after the workshop led by Andrew McKinney, who some of you may know, who's the OER coordinator at CUNY Central. So that started the conversation where we talked more about her course redesign and going beyond just making the course zero textbook cost, but how to really engage students in this process.
So the course that I chose to redesign is a course entitled Language, Literacy, and Educational Technology. And I decided to choose this course because, well, language, literacy, and educational technology seemed like a nice fit to teach them about open educational resources and engage them in using them to facilitate their own learning. In the hopes that using these resources, teaching them about it, they would then be able to find resources that they could use in their own K-12 classrooms. All of my students are graduate teaching students, or graduate students, and it's an advanced certification program. So they are already practicing teachers. They have to have initial certification to be accepted. And so many of them can take what they learn in class and apply it into their own classrooms almost immediately. So I thought this would be a nice course for impact. Not just me impacting them, but them impacting their own students. And then the whole open pedagogy piece, it really caught my eye because we want all students to be active and engaged learners, right? And so that's where that came from. So, what is open pedagogy? How many of you are familiar with OER? Open pedagogy? Okay, I lost some of you there. How about renewable assignments? Oh, I lost even more of you there. All right, so I'm not going to go into what OER is, since you're all familiar with that, but open pedagogy uses OER to reconceive the notion of students as active learners. They create knowledge, not just consume knowledge. It gives them the opportunity to empower them as learners and as students, as creators. So when you think of open pedagogy, students access openly licensed works, right? They access these, they can retain, reuse, remix, and redistribute. And revise, thank you. So empowering them to find these resources and then use them to share their work. In this course, OER Commons, if you're familiar with that, is a K-12, well, it's an education OER hub where anybody can post lessons. They can post any kind of teaching resources in any way, shape, or form. They have higher ed modules and they have K-12 resource builder. And so using this as a hub, they can go in and they can look at OER material, whether it be lesson plans. They can take those materials down and adapt them. They can remix them. And so it's a really powerful tool for K-12 education. So these elements, Peggotty says there's 8 attributes of open pedagogy. Everyone should participate. It allows people to participate. It encourages innovation and creativity. It encourages sharing of resources and ideas. But in order to do that, there has to be an element of trust and, where is that one? An element of trust and openness.
Openness, trust.
There you go. People, openness, and trust. Yeah. So these are the 8 elements that are attributes of open pedagogy.
So some of the examples of open pedagogy that are more commonly known are Robin DeRosa created the anthology of early American literature, where her students went out and found public domain work and compiled that so that they didn't have to buy sort of an anthology of public domain work anymore. And then in each semester, students have subsequently revised that, built on it, found images, really made it into a more robust resource. But it doesn't necessarily just have to be the course text that students are building. Rajiv Jangiani also did, for psychology, had students create test bank questions, which Robin actually spoke at the OER showcase 2 years ago. If any of you were at that, if any of you are going to the Northeast OER Summit, they'll actually be in conversation because they work together a lot, and they're keynoting that. There's an open pedagogy notebook that gives ideas for how you can engage in open pedagogy in multiple disciplines. So that's another thing that people can look at if that's something that you're interested in. But given that open pedagogy can take so many different shapes, what we looked at really was renewable assignments as well. So given that open pedagogy is a little bit nebulous and doesn't have a strict definition, Wiley and Hilton looked at what is OER-enabled pedagogy. So what are the things that you can do when you're using OER and things that have the 5R permission? So they created this chart of what a disposable assignment is. So a student creates something, right? They write an essay, they create an artifact. That's a disposable assignment. You do it once, your professor grades it, and then it doesn't go anywhere. It kind of dies in the LMS. Then there's authentic assignments. So the student creates an artifact. The artifact has value supporting that goes beyond what just the learning that happens by creating an artifact. Then there are constructionist assignments where it's made public, which, so it sort of each of these builds on the other. And then there are renewable assignments. So the idea behind the renewable assignment is the artifact is then the students are invited to openly license that artifact. So then that artifact can be revised, can be remixed, redistributed, can do all of the things that you can do with an OER. So that student work can then live beyond sort of just what's being created in and of itself.
They're no longer creating an assignment that dies. They're creating an assignment that can be shared publicly and reused by others. So it creates the OER they create is the beginning of a discussion for further work, if that makes sense. All right, so in my assignment, I kind of already have gone into this a little bit. I had them, well, the original assignment that I asked them to do was to create an inquiry unit or a problem-based learning unit or a project-based learning unit with their students, a unit that they create and then implement with their students. So I said, why am I just having them do this? And the impact, it was already an authentic assignment because it created value not just for them as students and their own learning, but then implementing it with their students created value for their students, right? So I said, why am I just having them create it, turn it into me, and they're done? That doesn't make sense. How can we use OER, build on what others have done, or redesign something, or create something from scratch that they can then openly share with others? And so that gets them into the work of the OER. So that's what I did. I took this assignment and I said, well, you no longer have to redesign it from scratch. You can now go into OER Commons, find something that you think would be useful for your students, and adapt it to your students' needs. You can remix, you can take pieces and parts of things that you find on OER Commons and create a whole unit or a lesson or resources. So I kind of open it up a lot. They can create a module, a learning module for students that may be in a flipped classroom. This would be what students do at home. And then here's how we can add on to it in school. They can create a series of lesson plans. They can still do the inquiry unit. They could curate almost a collection of technological resources and talk about how this might be used in their classroom. Or they can create exemplar models of projects. So this is what I want you to create, like a model for their students. And so those are the things that they are allowed to pull down from OER Commons and then put out. So in this, it took me a while to wrap my mind, how do I know that this is true open pedagogy, that this is an open OER-enabled pedagogy assignment, a renewable assignment? And that's where the collaboration between Stacy and I came in, not just finding OER resources, but then, okay, what is a tool that can be used in K-12 education? And then how do I know that this matches that? And so,
right, and so we were also looking at how do we build habits for these students. So that's why OER Commons was a really great space for this particular project, because it has K-12 resources that then students, when they're teachers, could go back to that resource as well and know where they could search for those. So then looking at the assignment, so our students asked to create new artifacts or revise or remix existing ones, and they were. Does the artifact have value beyond the learning of the author, beyond the student creation? So that was already in place, but yes, the project goes beyond even just the teacher who's the student, as well as their students now, to others who could access it through OER Commons. Are students invited to publicly share their artifacts of revised or remixed OER? And yes, so they are invited to share it through with the shared resource collection for the class, or to share it on OER Commons. So it's not mandatory that students share it on OER Commons, but they are required to share it within their class, which is a really important consideration of how students are invited to share openly and not mandated to share openly. And then invited to openly license their new artifacts, so then they're invited to share it more widely with the world.
So I had to scaffold, I had to think about how I would scaffold the class in order to get my students here. Because I'm assuming that they're coming in with very little to no knowledge of OER. And so throughout the course, it starts with a module on what is OER, what is Creative Commons licensing. And then after they start to understand that, and we have a class session where we can talk about it and explore some resources. Now, how is OER curated in a way? I want them to see, because one of the main concerns is that this OER content hasn't been vetted. It's not quality content. And so actually having them go into OER Commons to get familiar, A, with the tool itself, and B, actually evaluate it so they can get a feel for what are others going to be viewing my work with the lens. And then from there, then talking about how the assignment and pulling down things. And after they create it, that piece where they're invited to publicly share it, we have to talk about now, what is the Creative Commons license resource that you're using, right? And what does it mean to openly share it yourself?
Right. I mean, what license are you going to choose, and what license does the existing resource have? But we really wanted to look at how are we asking students to share, not just, oh, you should do this because it's a really good idea and other people can see your stuff, but really considering this model by Catherine Cronin of, will I share openly? Who will I share with? Who will I share as? And will I share this? So she looks at it at that micro, macro, meso, micro, and nano levels to balance sort of students' privacy and their openness. Because it's one thing to make that decision as an educator, it's another thing to have to do it in a class as a student. So we didn't want to mandate that they share with everyone out there, but they did have to share it within the class, which is more typical of our education system. But that they have the option to share openly if they choose to, and that they can hopefully see some benefit in that as well.
Yeah, and so that's where the class resource folder comes in. And my vision for this is that this will build over time. So it will be a shared class resource. And when I implement this in the fall, it'll just be these 20 projects from students in that class. But then the next fall, when the course is offered again, now there's 40 projects to choose from. And so it's not just OER Commons, it's also, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do this, whether it's through a CUNY Academic Commons or it could be through Google Class folder, that anybody who comes through this course now has access to this. So while it's not shared widely with the public, it is still shared with a Lehman community of learners, which helps them to conceptualize the contribution that they're making to the world, the basically, or to at least the Lehman community. So in doing that, they have to think about what is the license that was on the resource. If I chose to adapt a resource or remix content, what was that license? Because if it's CC by share alike, they have to share it with that same attribution, the Creative Commons license. And then after considering that, how open are you willing to share this? Do you want others looking at your work, and do you want others to be able to adapt it? Do you want others to be able to use it commercially? Do you want others to be able to make derivations of it, or are they just allowed to keep it and hold it? So what's nice about OER Commons is that when you go into it, it has the Creative Commons licensing, but the way it poses those questions helps them to think about it in a different way. Like, can others make money? Do you want others to be able to make money off of your work rather than NC license? Do you want others to be able to adapt and change it rather than ND license on it? So it helps them to see it in a different way and leads them through it that way.
So that's pretty much the process that we went through. But with the remaining time we have, thought we would ask just what might this look like within different disciplines? Is there a way that you could imagine using this in your course? You can have a minute to think about it.
Are most of you in education? No, other fields. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk with a partner? Talk about what a renewable assignment might look like in your discipline. I know it's a lofty question.
And right before lunch.
Maybe do you want to share behind you?
You have about 12 minutes.
I would never want to share unless they wanted online, so sometimes they're very I don't say so
It's too bad that it's set up in rows like this. I can't really go in here when people are talking about
they don't really do research. They just use what I give them. That's basically I haven't thought about this. I just in my mind, yeah. Even if they wanted to. Some people
All right, if you would go ahead and finish up your conversation.
Oh, that's what my kids do.
Yeah, it's a good teaching strategy. It honors their finishing. Well, that's a different.
She always has to read
Yeah. All right, if we could go ahead and come back together. All right, so let's go ahead and share some of the ideas that you had with your partner from your individual disciplines.
We invite you to
We
share.
invite you to share, we're not required.
So I'm in the bio department.
Okay,
And I teach anatomy and physiology.
okay.
So we were discussing, I'm playing around with this idea of sort of centering some of my courses based on certain diseases. So let's say I'm teaching diabetes, for example, talk about how diabetes affects the circulatory system, how diabetes affects the nervous system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe having students come up with some sort of content about what they've learned about diabetes and how it affects that particular system. And then the next semester, as you suggested, maybe focus maybe on one organ system per semester, and then every semester we focus on a different organ system, and have students upload content about that particular organ system and how things change over time, how pharmaceuticals change over time, and to sort of add an interdisciplinary slant to it. We can also invite other departments to talk about how various diseases affect not only us biologically or physically, but also economically, also socially. So it has a sort of, I guess, interdisciplinary slant to it.
So it would be a resource that you would continue adding to with each class in a shared folder, or using a resource such as CUNY Academic Commons or Manifold. Yeah, that's a great idea. When you were talking, I was also thinking they could create as a class like a PSA about diabetes to share more widely, put it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Thank you.
I was saying how one of the examples I presented this morning in talking about CTEC's Open Lab, there was a learning community with freshman composition, intro to hospitality management, and I'm blanking on the name of the, I guess, culinary one in hospitality management. And they built out a site that had in their freshman comp class, they talked about what does it mean to be a first-year student, what are the skills you need to have, and so students wrote on different topics about study skills and time management and whatnot. And then students in the other hospitality management classes wrote about downtown Brooklyn tourism, and another one about where to eat in the area. And so it became this nice resource. Another semester in architecture class added in about architecture in the area, but I said one of the problems was there was no one to maintain it, and so I think this example is really great because it's more the faculty member is kind of driving that, but like having it in a shared space is great, but to have someone who can kind of continue to curate that is something.
So that's an important factor to consider. I hadn't thought about who's going to manage it, who's going to keep managing it.
We need a project driver.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Anyone willing to share?
So my discipline is counselor education, and I teach graduate students. I'm also interested because you teach graduate students, I know, and they're working and they're, and this is actually asking them to do something different. So though they're in counselor education, school counseling, they do go into classrooms and do lessons. So college readiness, college access, social emotional, test anxiety, the whole the push for school counselors and school counseling programs is to much more try and get to the whole school, and so they'll do not just individual counseling, but really go into classrooms and work with the mission of the school. So I think that they really could look at, what are some of what's out there in higher education, looking also at K through 12 of how can one create college readiness in a K through 12 classroom. So I think that, and I like the idea of even if they don't share it widely. I'm also interested in the ethics of pedagogy, and I think that there's an ethical piece in here that you touched on when there are all the questions of do you want someone to profit on it, and how does one curate it? And so I think you raised some interesting points. So
Which is not something I think typically in education specifically we talk about licensing that often.
right.
And so bringing in this Creative Commons licensing also brings in, okay, what is copyright as well?
Because I'm a big fan of Wikipedia assignments, and I was wondering, this was very close to it, right? Or
Yeah, absolutely. You could definitely use Wikipedia and an open pedagogy as they're creating it, they're sharing it.
In the Open Pedagogy Workshop, which really started to spark my interest in this, one of the assignments was, I can't remember what kind of class it was, but in the local community, there was no Wikipedia page on this. Do you know what I'm talking about? No.
I don't know.
It's like an important piece of the community, like a park or a statue or something, and there was no Wikipedia page on it. And so the class started the Wikipedia page, and future classes came in and edited and yeah. And so they're publicly sharing the work, and they had to do a lot of research to create it.
Right, which also gets at the question of who creates knowledge. So it's really that leveling the playing field for students and seeing that they can be the creators.
So not just consumers.
Yes, in addition to sharing, if anyone has any questions or wants to discuss anything from the presentation from Jennifer's class or our collaboration, we'd be happy to discuss that as well. Or if not, there's like 3 minutes and lunch.
I guess I just wonder, it's something that we talk about a lot for the Open Lab, of making work that is open and others have access to, and to kind of bring that ethos of sharing your work and the model you're setting up where like the next semester students are going to see what the previous semester did. Do you find that students have trouble breaking out of a different mindset about like that's cheating or that, and what kind of work do you do to teach students about not just the ethics of openness, but the value of openness?
So I have not implemented yet. I will implement in fall, but those are things that I'm sure are going to come up, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to address them yet. But yeah, definitely something to think about. So in education, there's teachers pay teachers. So teachers create lessons or resources and then get paid for it. And usually they charge a nominal fee, like $1 or $5 for this. And so I don't think in education specifically, we're always begging, borrowing, and stealing from others, we say. And so I don't know that it's going to be a foreign concept to them. I think that they're already going to be familiar with it. But the idea of now I'm not stealing, I'm sharing, and I'm encouraging this to be developed so that it can become more finely curated, more valuable, more critical over time. And I think that's where I want my students to see the value of OER and how they can contribute to this community. Because I think as students, they're always, oh, I'm a student, I'm here to just take in knowledge. And I know you're a student and you're learning this, you have something valuable to contribute. And I want them to see that and take that away with them in my classes. All right. Well, thank you very much.